Hi, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Mental Toughness and Body Show. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Amanda McEwin. She's a distinguished property developer and visionary founder of Rising Star Developer. Since embarking on her property development journey in 2011, Amanda has incredibly created over $59 million worth of property, and I'm sure that's grown as of today, and developed 97 homes, each yielding a six-figure profit minimum. And she's educated over 10,000 individuals, provided personalized guidance to over 500 students, empowering them to achieve their financial freedom. And what I really love about Amanda is her and I started in the same institution on the same path as being chartered accountants and realized how bad that was and got out, and we've gone to create our own financial freedom and have a lot of fun in the process. So Amanda, it's an honor to welcome you to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I wanted to start off with maybe tell us a little bit about we've got a mixture of people that listen to this show. We've got people that are already millionaires, people that are aspiring to be millionaires, and there'll be those people that are perhaps sitting where you were 10, 11 years ago thinking, man, this is such a grind. I'm really not enjoying it. You want your financial freedom and so forth. And don't want to steal any of your thunder as to whether that was your main driver, but can you maybe take us back 10 years as to what you were thinking at the time and why you thought property and property development was the way for you?
Well, my whole wealth creation journey actually started in July the 7th, 2010. And the reason I know that is because it was the arrival of my third daughter. So picture this, it was the day two after having my third daughter. I had a 15-month-old and a 2.5-year-old bouncing on the bed behind me. And my husband goes to me, you know what, Amanda, I think we should invest in property. And I must have given him the strongest glare because that shut the conversation down very, very quickly. I wasn't really in the headspace of talking about wealth creation 2 days of a newborn. And what happened is that planted a seed that popped through the surface when I had to go back to work 7 months after having my third child. And I had to go back to work after every one of my children because we had a big fat mortgage that required two incomes to support that. And it wasn't until I got to the third child that I thought, you know what? This is not how I pictured my life to be, how the parent that I wanted to be, because I was spending most of my days at work and having to put my three girls into childcare. It was heartbreaking, constantly dropping off
Yeah.
young children there. So that was really the start of the wealth creation journey. So from there, I started just doing the traditional buy and hold, buying investment properties, and thought that was going to be, help towards our wealth creation. But that actually ended up tying me to my job because I was taking on more debt and
Yeah.
we hit the bank's glass ceiling.
Purposely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that led me to looking for other wealth creation strategies. And then throughout that journey of educating myself and learning from other people who were doing really well, I then stumbled across property development. At the time, I thought I'd gone property investment, renovation, and then got exposed to property development. And I was always like, who am I to be a property developer? I'm a mum of three kids. I've had been in accounting and other corporate roles. I thought you had to be a rich magnate with a fast car and a big, deep pockets to be able to do property development, right? So, but what really connected with me was from what I was learning, the fact that it wasn't going to take a huge amount of my time because I was striving for wealth, but really I was actually striving to have control over my time. That was really the driver behind me wanting to be able to create that wealth so I could spend time with my kids and be around. And so that really led me to through that evolution of trying something and not working. I tried all these different wealth creation strategies, Amazon and
Yeah.
all these other sort of things, Airbnb and whatever it was, whatever I could get my hands on to try and get that financial freedom, which then ultimately gave me my time freedom. And it wasn't until I got to property development that things really changed and changed. That was in 2015 or 2013. I educated myself. 2014, I found my first deal. 2015, I banked my first two deals, and that cleared off our mortgage. And life from then, I could say goodbye to my job, and life from then changed very quickly.
Yeah, that's so awesome to hear you talk about that. Just for the audience perspective, and refresh my memory, Sydney or Brisbane?
Adelaide, good old
Oh, you're
Adelaide.
Adelaide. Oh,
Yeah,
there you go. That's right. Adelaide, Adelaide.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right. So, when we first connected and hearing what you do with property development, because you can
Yeah.
hear the word property development and people thinking multi-story
Mm.
buildings, condos in the US, that kind of stuff. But you've got a very specific strategy. I'm going to get the names wrong, so I'm not going to try and name it. But essentially, you buy one one house block and you develop that residential house block. You don't do commercial, well, unless you're going off that way, but you've stuck to a very specific niche. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I certainly don't build the buildings that are behind you in your virtual background. I
Yeah.
do what's called small scale property development, or it can be called micro development. So what it typically involves is purely residential. So I don't do commercial or industrial or any other forms of development. It's purely residential development, and I call it small scale property development. And so what that means, it means getting a simple block that can be developed. And I liken it to a simple way of explaining this is like a cake, right? So you go to a cafe, you buy a slice of cake, you might pay $8 for that cake. But if you go and buy the whole cake, it might only cost you $40, right?
Yeah.
But then if you cut up that cake into 10 different slices, you're actually going to make money from that because you're adding value by cutting it up and then selling them individually. And it's a bit like property development. You get a block of land and you're putting one or more houses. When I say small scale, I'm sort of saying between 1 up to 10. Anything more than 10, it starts getting a bit bigger. But typically sort of 1 to 6 is the sweet spot. So it's getting a block of land and putting between 1 and 6 homes on that block. And various different designs. It might be single story, it might be double story. But it's a size project that is really attainable to the everyday person. And it's a strategy that, has been very lucrative for myself, but also for many of my members inside my community as well.
So I guess I could jump to the testimonials at the end, but I think it's probably worthy to get people to maybe prick up their ears and say, oh gosh, maybe talk about maybe a couple of your success stories in what you've done, because I've watched some of the testimonials like, wow, this is
Yeah,
really, really impressive. And I think like you said at the start, you don't have to already be driving the Ferrari or whatever and be
no,
thinking, oh well, property deals, I'm putting like 60, like I'm doing like buying
yeah.
100 acres and putting in the roads and the infrastructure and that. We're not talking about that. So yeah, maybe talk about a couple of your success stories.
Yeah, for sure. Gosh, I've got many. So what we do inside of my inner circle program is we've got what's called a 6 and a 7 figure club. So every single year we celebrate the milestone of anybody who's banked a 6 or 7 figure profit in the former 12 months. So every single year we're getting, more than 5 students that are actually banking those sort of profits from their deals. So like last year I actually had seven people that hit that milestone, one 7 figure club as well, which is really exciting. So I had one student who just built a single home and banked over $200,000 in an area that was growing. I had another student who went on from doing just their first deal, which he ended up sourcing that deal from another fellow inner circle member, which was a 6 site. So one block carved up into 6 homes. And that was his first deal. And he's banked over
Wow.
$500,000 on his very
Wow.
first deal. And he's
Profit.
now gone on profit. Yeah, I'm talking profit here. And he's now gone on to have 5 other deals active right now. He's a full-time developer. That's now his gig, which is his growth has been amazing. I've had some other students who had an investment property and they realized from what I taught them that their investment property actually had development potential. So what they were going to do is they were going to put 5 on it or 6 on it because the zoning allowed that. But then the zoning changed and council wanted them to put multi-story apartments, and that
Oh,
was
wow.
way out of their risk profile. But what they did is because they understood what the value of that property was, they ended up selling that site to a developer, a bigger developer who builds the sort of buildings behind you. And they banked over $350,000, didn't even have to build, they just sold the block and that cleared off their mortgage. And so I've got so many other success stories. If you go to my website, you can have a look at the
Yeah,
success
you can
stories
see
there.
them
There's
all
like a
there.
stream of people's results. So it's really inspiring for me. I've been very fortunate to had the benefits firsthand of paying off my mortgage and the lifestyle that's had for us. But when you earn a certain level of money, the money doesn't have as big an impact anymore. So being able to see my members, my students, being able to replicate success like I've been able to with projects has been amazing. So, and that sort of success has been able to pay off their mortgage if they want to, or help with their kids' school fees, or go on holidays, or just things, or get back control of their time. Everyone has their own version of what financial independence means for them. That could just be retiring or getting control of their time, whatever it is. It's so unique to everybody else. But the amazing thing that I love about what I teach is it's the same process, but it can be applied in so many different ways. And the outcome and the results of that just impacts other people's lives in so many different ways as well, which is amazing.
Given everything that you've learnt now, and
Yeah.
let's say that you were now teaching you back at the start,
Yeah.
how much would you have fast tracked, do you think? Because I want to ask you about the failures. We'll go a bit dark for a bit, and because
Yeah.
you learn from those. But
Yeah, I
how
do.
how much have you fast tracked? Do you believe, based on everything that you've gone through over the last 10 years? Because obviously now, like you said, about having the impact, I think is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm similar. Once you've achieved a level of success for yourself, you just want to help others do
Yeah.
it just because it feels authentic and it feels great to
Yeah.
help people. So how much would it have sped up your process if you had the version of you now right at the start of your journey?
Oh my goodness, it would have really probably fast tracked a few years. I think with the impact of property development is because the profits are so lucrative, like you're talking 6 and 7 figure profits, that I was able to I banked $630,000 after my first 2 deals. But what would have happened is I would have had better support. So rather than just
Yeah,
bumbling my way
on your
through
own.
and making mistakes and working it all out, I mean, I've always invested in mentors and always found people who are wanting to have achieved what I want to achieve and learnt from them and implemented what they've taught me. But with what I'm doing now, I learned from the bigger end of town. So from an educator who was doing the sort of buildings behind you or big land
Yeah.
divisions. So I just tailored that and made it small, to an everyday person, because I'm also married to a really risk averse husband, right? So I had to make sure that I was tackling deals that were within our risk profile and also our financial capacity. So what would have been different? I think I would have still got there, but it would have happened a lot quicker, and probably a few less bumps along the way, because I would have had the support and being able to just bounce off those questions where I had no idea of someone who was doing something similar. I think that's certainly probably a big difference.
Maybe just quickly, what's the difference between the strategy that you started with, which is buy and hold,
Yeah.
versus what you're doing now? Obviously, buy and hold, you've got to, probably wait 5 to 7 years before you're going to start to get a good capital return on that. So it's obviously slower. Is that really the main difference? We can just achieve a lot more by doing the developments rather than just buying and holding.
Well, it's quite different in a number of ways. Look, I'm also an advocate of property investment. It's certainly a strategy that can be right for people depending on their circumstances. But based on my circumstances, what was happening, and typically it's traditionally 7 to 10 years. Quite often it's more than 10 years in order for your property prices to double. But so say, for example, if you're earning $20,000 to $30,000 per year on your investment property, growth wise, and then you rental, by the time you get your rent back, you've got to pay your mortgage and your property manager and all your costs. So you end up being pretty much cash neutral or negative geared to be able to have that investment property.
Yeah.
What it does though is you have to wait considerably a long time to be able to get those returns. But what happens is you have to service the debt for an investment property. So if you don't already have a big wads of cash, you've typically got to take debt to get the investment property, which then, quite often you're neutral or negative gearing. It then ties you to your job. So if you're wanting to get time freedom, it actually ties you to job longer. So, because you've got to wait till you sell to be able to get those profits, and that can be 10 years plus.
Yes.
So it's a very different strategy. And then you're managing tenants and all that, the logistics of all of that. But for me, what the big impact for me was getting rid of my mortgage, because as soon as I got rid of my mortgage, that then it got rid of the bank off the back, which then also meant that the big chunk of money that goes into paying off your mortgage every fortnight, month, what have you, stayed in our bank account. So it's like a cash flow accelerator effect of us getting rid of our mortgage. And what that also meant, right, was that the bank was off our back, but then we also had extra cash in our account. And that gave me choice to be able to leave my job and get control over my time. So that's, and I was able to do that because when you're doing development deals, you can choose to develop and keep. But what my goal was to get rid of my mortgage. So I was developing and selling, and then using those big lump sum profits to get rid of my mortgage. And then once you've done that, then you can use a lump sum profits for whether it's creating buffers or buying other wealth creation strategies, whatever, depending on your financial circumstances. But what I found was I just wanted to get rid of debt. And I wasn't able to do that. If I would have had to have had multiple properties, investment properties, to be able to do that with a truckload of debt. I wouldn't have had. I would still be working with somebody else right now if that was the case. I would have missed out on the last 10 years or 8 years, amazing years that I've had having full control over my time, if I was continuing down the strategy that I initially started off at.
Yeah, fabulous. So good to hear this story. Tell us, let's talk about perhaps investment strategy. So when it comes, what are the strategies that, well, I suppose first of all, obviously you've got students everywhere, not just in Adelaide,
Yeah,
but
in Australia,
like the personal work that you're doing, is it only in Adelaide, or are you Australia wide, or?
My personal developments? No, my personal developments are only in Adelaide. I'm one of these people that really likes to keep life simple. So,
Yeah.
so I like to be able to just keep things. The strategy
Drive
works.
past it and see it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. At times, definitely. I like to go. I've actually got a demolition happening at the moment, so I like to be able to go by and take some photos and be able to see that sort of
Check the
thing.
progress. Yeah.
Yeah, but for me, I know Adelaide, I could easily develop. I've built a house in Queensland before. I could easily use the same strategy elsewhere, but there's plenty of opportunity here, so I don't need to go anywhere else.
Yeah.
So if I felt that I wanted a challenge, I could do a deal in other states because you can manage projects remotely. But I do my deals in Adelaide. But I've got students all around Australia using the same strategy and that I use on my projects here all around Australia, both in cities and also regional as well. So that's the thing I love about what I teach, right? Because I teach a fundamental process, but that process, I love hearing how my members take that process and apply it to their circumstances. So I have some members that are creating NDIS, like disability housing. I've got some people creating student housing. I've got some people creating forever homes. I've got some people creating townhouse developments. Like it's the same process or simple land divisions. People take the same principles and just apply it to deals in their neighborhood, or perhaps create product that resonates with them. Like I create a lot of affordable housing, which is something that I'm quite passionate about. And so that's the unique thing about once you understand the fundamental process is it can be tailored to whatever connects with you as well.
So your process in identifying, okay, this is a block, no, this is not a block, and so forth. Obviously, you said you're doing a demo at the moment, so not just looking for land. Do you have some key things that you're looking for that say, yeah, no, this is definitely a no-go, and this one is, yeah, this one's good?
Absolutely. So whenever we look for a deal, I'm about to speak to my husband after now just to fine tune a deal that we're about to put an offer on. The numbers tell us what we're going to do, right? Firstly, so we use a feasibility model, and then we put all our inputs into there, what we're going to buy the site for, what it's going to cost to create that product, what we're going to sell that product for. I mean, that key feasibility tells us what sort of profit is in that deal. And so if we don't have a decent profit before we even put an offer on, we don't even bother with that. So that's the first thing, understanding the profit behind a deal. But then it's also doing research about the area. Are we creating product in an area where people want to live? Because no one's creating something if no one wants to live there, right? So we do, research around that, and then we have our risk strategy. We look at the deal risk from a feasibility perspective, from a location perspective, making sure that what we want to create, that you can actually create that in the area that you want to create it as well. So we always come from a risk first, profit second perspective, because the numbers are so lucrative when you do feasibilities, right? It's very easy to get that greed gland happening and the dollar signs happening in your eyes, and then not looking at the risk. Whereas once we know the numbers stack up, then we manage the risk side of it and make sure we can minimize that as much as possible, so that we're then comfortable to then take on that project. So we know it's going to be profitable. We know we can do what we want to do. based on that area in the council's development plan. We know that product is in demand because we speak to the right people to give us that information. So we try and work through all those risks before we even buy a project.
And typically, are we talking minutes, hours, days, weeks for that process to
Oh,
take place for you?
so the funny thing is, right? Like, this is one thing that typically 3 to 5 hours a week is all we'd spend maximum on running. So we've got 3 projects active at the moment. We're about to add a fourth, and we're probably spending 3 to 5 hours a week max. Sometimes nothing,
Yeah, right.
sometimes maybe 10 hours. But that's because the thing is with property development, that's one of the things why I love this strategy, right? Is you can easily do it on the side of your current gig. Like, I
Mm.
always say to my members, don't leave your job until you bank 2 times your income, to make sure you've got that safety blanket over you and you can still pay the rent and put food on the table. You want to make sure you've got that buffer there. So yeah, I can't remember. I've lost my train of thought. What was I got a bit excited there?
That's okay. Um, let's move on to perhaps another aspect of that, which is around the relationship side of things. Because obviously,
Yeah.
if you're all doing them all in Adelaide and so forth, do you is your model that you've really wanted to set up really strong relationships, say with the same builders, the architects,
Yeah.
I guess your town planners are separate, but or all of those key people,
Mhm.
so that you're just using effectively the same model, the same team
Yeah.
thing. You've got the trust in them. You know
Yeah.
that Rob, you need to go do the tiling today, whatever, bang, you know it's going to be done because we're working together for years and stuff. Is that the best way to do this?
Yeah, for sure. So building, I call it your A team. So building your A team is really key, because that's another thing. Going back to your time question, which now came back to me, and the reason why this business doesn't take a lot of your time is because you have your A team doing a lot of the legwork. So you'll go to your architect or your designer and go, "Can you please design me a 3-site, double story, 140 square meters, XYZ?" You give them the parameters. They're the ones that go away and spend hours on CAD creating and designing your home, and then
Yeah,
you'll pass it to your finance broker, and they'll go and speak to all your banks and spend hours doing that. And then your builder, they're the ones that are doing all the estimation and buying all the materials and dealing with trades. They're doing all the legwork. You're just basically project managing all of that.
yeah,
So definitely having that A team that you build, because once you've got that, then like this new deal that we have, I'll just call my designer and go, "Can you design XYZ?" I'll go speak to my builder and go, "Hey, this is coming. Get ready for this."
yeah,
Speak to my broker. How much money can I have? Like, so that becomes a lot quicker when you have your A team. But it's like any other business, right? Relationships are key,
yeah.
and it can it certainly makes it more fun, and it can certainly make your ride a lot smoother if you've got a great team around you.
And so when you're doing that deal, you mentioned the numbers before. I mean, you don't have to tell me dollars or anything, but is there a set percentage where you say, do you know what, we need to be getting, I don't know, say 20%
Yeah,
out of this. That's what we need to be making. Otherwise, if it's 15, we're just not going there.
yeah.
And you just set a hard and fast rule so you don't get emotional about it.
Absolutely. So it has to be minimum of 15%, or what, don't even bother.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And
And
that's
that,
a
sorry,
profit on
you go.
cost. That's profit on cost. So yeah, so making sure that yeah, we've got a decent margin in there, because things can move, the market can move, your build cost might come up higher. By being strict on that, it means that regardless of which way things swing, up and down, and that happens with projects, we always want to make sure that we're making money. And I've completed 24 projects, created 97 homes, and never ever lost money. Made 6-figure profits on every single deal, because we're strict with making sure that we've got those working within those parameters up front.
Yeah. And so I guess as part of this, you have become a master negotiator because a lot of this is in the buy, isn't it? The profit's in the buy if you can get it better. But then obviously you're also building. So I guess what I have heard before that, I don't know, let's say that you're building four units
Mm-hmm.
on the place. Maybe the first three are paying for it and the profit's in the last one or something like
Yeah.
that. That a reasonable
Yeah. I mean, as a developer,
representation?
you only get paid when the last one sells. So that's your payday effectively.
Yeah. And so, how do you rate your own negotiation skills then? Have you become better and harder at those things, or
Oh, see, I probably do things a little bit differently, right? So I'm a negotiator, but I'm also very fair, because my life philosophy and my business philosophy is it's always got to be win-win or don't bother. So for me, when I'm doing my feasibilities, I'm basing my offer number based on what the numbers are telling me, like what the cost is, what it's going to cost me to create that product, what can I sell for that product, and then what do I need to buy for that product for to make sure that I've got my minimum margin in there. So if that happens and that price is above where the vendor is wanting, then you know what, that's a win for them, but it's also a win for me because I get the deal and it still makes profit. Whereas if the offer price ends up being lower than what the vendor is, the way that I negotiate is like, well, I'm not trying to rip you off. It's just purely this is what the feasibility is telling me. This is all I
Yes.
can afford to offer. And there's no emotion involved because the numbers are driving the decision. So, look, I'm sure there's plenty, a lot better negotiators than me, but I always do come from a place of fairness and win-win. And if I'm getting a deal because I'm ripping somebody else off, that doesn't sit right with me. So I
Yeah.
always just make sure that I do things fairly. My numbers tell me what I can offer. If that suits a vendor, then awesome. We get a win-win. If that doesn't suit the vendor and I miss out, then I'm okay with that
Just
too.
walk away. Yeah.
I just walk away.
I mean, it's all about the long-term relationship, isn't
Yeah.
it? Because if you form a good relationship with me and I've got lots of stock coming on, then
Yeah.
we're going to work together
Yeah.
more often, and we both win from that, don't we? I did say
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about maybe some failures, if you like, or
Yeah.
some tough times that you've gone through.
Yeah.
You said that you've made six figures on every deal, but
Yeah.
what would be perhaps an example of a really tough time that you've had to go through and what you've learned from that?
Yeah, for sure. I call it the roller coaster ride of property development, right? Even though you make money, every single project teaches you something new, and every single project will give you a new challenge that you perhaps haven't dealt with. And so I've certainly had challenges, even though each project has been profitable, there's been challenges that I've had to work through. I think if I look back, probably the biggest challenge for me was um, March of 2020 when COVID hit. I had 4 projects on the go, and the market went to a grinding standstill. So I had a project that just handed over. I had 4 homes, brand new homes that I put on the market like the week that COVID hit. I had a 5 site that I was about to start construction with. I had a 6 site where I had 2 left, and I made some design mistakes there, so they were slower to move. And then I had another 3 site which I'd already pre-sold. So I remember my husband and I sitting down when we got locked down, and going, "Oh dear, like what the hell is just happening here? We've got this product landing, and how are we going to manage all this? And what happens if this turns pear-shaped?" And we had no visibility of what was going to happen in the market. But what we did is we sat down and looked at all of our projects and went, okay, what would happen if everything turned to custard? If we couldn't sell any of these products, what would happen if this, basically just looked across the whole portfolio and thought, okay, if this worst thing happens, what's our backup strategy? And what that really drove home for us is because right from the very beginning, we've always come from a risk first profit second strategy, that we
Mm.
have risk mitigation strategies for all of our projects anyway. So because we had that in place already, when it came to looking across everything, we knew that nothing, like we were going to be okay because we could fire sell these ones here and break even because we had profit, but we could have just broken even and fire sold them really, really cheap and got out of that project. We could stop building this one here. These ones had pre-sales. This one over here, we could drop down and we still had plenty of margin to play with. And that's where your profit margins are so important, to make sure you've got those buffers. So if anything does really turn bad, you know that you can still keep your shirt on. And I think
Yeah.
it was a really good lesson for us. We were doing it anyway, but it just made us be able to sleep a lot better at night, knowing that we had managed the risk across everything, in a time where we didn't have a lot of certainty. So
I know one of the things when you do run your own business, and you mentioned about 3 to 5 hours there on project management, but
yeah,
I know that once you've had success, what do you want? You want more success. And there's no way that people might hear that and they say, "Oh, she's only working 5 hours a week in her business." That would
yeah,
not be true. And you're working heaps and heaps, and you just want to add more and more value, and with all your
yeah,
students and everything as well. Um, Being the mental toughness and body show, I always like
yeah,
to talk to people about their health and wellness and so
yeah,
forth, and how you balance it. You've got a couple of kids in there as well.
yeah,
What are some of your like key strategies to be able to just like, do you know what? Yes, it's because this can be really stressful at
yeah.
times as well, and how you just balance yourself out.
Yeah, for sure. And look, when I say 3 to 5 hours, that's my development business. I somehow wanted to be busier, so I created a whole new education business. So I do work more than 3 to 5 hours. Most of my time is actually spent supporting my members in my education business. And look, I think it's a work in progress, the whole mental toughness and wellness. But one philosophy that's really important to me, and it always has been, is my wealth is my health. So I've always made sure that there's probably I always look after myself. So I always make sure that sleep is really, really important. That I'm getting at least ideally 7 to 8 hours sleep. So I'm into bed and up early, and so that's I protect that.
Yeah.
Eating well, crap in, crap out. So I want to make sure like what I do requires a lot of energy, whether that's supporting my members or being a mum to 3 teenage girls or just being able to have fun in life. You need energy.
Yeah.
So I'm conscious of making sure that I'm fueling my body with the food that's going to give me that energy. And then movement, like trying to be as fit as I possibly can. I'm actually in the moment training for a bike ride. Never done this before. I'm not a bike rider, but I'm riding 500 Ks across Thailand it's 500 Ks in 5 days in Thailand in March. So it's going to be humid, hot,
Wow.
and a big challenge. So I do think crazy things like that as well, just to
Yeah.
keep life interesting. But yeah, I think, hydration, good food, movement, sleep. And then I also do yoga. That's like my mental health benefit. So I try to balance all of that. And at times it swings one way where, perhaps some days are better, some weeks are better than others, but I'm always very conscious of making sure that I keep those habits and keep my health as a number one priority.
Love hearing that. Well done. What would you say is really important to you right now?
Important to me right now is that's a really good question. For me, it is trying to be the best version that I can of myself that I can be, so that I can be there for those who need me. So whether that's my family or my members, um, being really clear about what I need to achieve and being protective over my time, so that I can not over, so I can um, under promise and over deliver. So that's being conscious of how I spend my day and making sure that I'm choosing things that are in alignment with my bigger values. So whether that's my kids or my business, and generally it's a balance of both, and my health, making sure that and being really protective over my time is probably something that I'm focusing on, so that I can then not get too overwhelmed and stressed, because then I'm not showing up as the best version of myself. So that's probably a bit of a long-winded answer, but
Oh, that's fine.
yeah.
What would you say is someone's trying to pitch a deal to you, something like that? What would you say is your biggest pet peeve when people are trying to pitch you a deal?
When they've got just unrealistic expectations on how much the deal's worth, I get that quite regularly. I get a lot of calls from agents with off-market deals, and they'll go, "Yeah, this is a great deal," and I put it into the feasibility model, and there's no money in it. It's like, mate, that's not a good
Okay.
deal. So, but that's not really a pet peeve. I just tick and flick it. So, yeah, what would be that? That sort of thing doesn't really annoy me. Yeah, that's probably the most of it right now.
Yeah, okay. All right, cool. What about let's say your legacy? I just got a couple more questions to get.
Yeah.
Your legacy, how do you think you'd like to be remembered? What's important for you in that aspect?
Um, it, I'd like to be remembered knowing that I've left a positive mark on this world, whether that is through being able to help somebody else achieve their version of financial independence or get control over their time, whether that is my children um, having seen me manage business and live the life that I've lived, if that's inspired them in some way to be the best version of themselves. Um, yeah, I think I have a very simple legacy, and it's just to make a positive difference in this world.
What's one thing that I find this particularly challenging with kids? So like you've obviously your background and what your parents are. I know we had a conversation last time about poor
Mm,
money mindset, and my
yeah.
parents had poor money mindset, and I started with a poor money mindset myself before I started as a chartered accountant, and then I was determined not to have the same grief that they did, and I sought out the knowledge and stuff. Unfortunately, It wasn't through real estate earlier on in, in my life. It was through shares and just owning my own residential home and upgrading over time and holding for
Yeah.
10 years and yeah, slow and grow kind of thing. But now I've lost the train of my thought.
You're talking about, what influence, I guess, in terms of
Oh, yeah.
having
So
not
for
come from money.
the kids, right? So
Mm,
now you've built your wealth, and I think
yeah,
that can be really like it's like you're holding this pot of gold that you don't just want to give to the kids, where
yeah,
they're like, oh, I can kick back. Mum and dad have done all this and so
yeah,
forth. So, how do you do that with the kids? Because I know it will be a nice problem for a lot of people to have, but I know that it's a
yeah.
real problem when I talk to my wealthy clients, and that they all have a slightly different approach as to how they do it. So I'm just curious as to how you manage that.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, it's a work in progress. And I was actually just having a conversation with my husband about this before I jumped on this podcast. So as we spoke about, Rob, I didn't come from money as well. Both my parents struggled financially all their lives, and weren't very good with money at all. So I grew up with a very scarce money mindset, and that required a lot of work for me to be able to shift that, to even believe that I was worthy of the wealth
Yeah.
that I've created. So
Right there
um,
with you.
yeah, and I think for my kids, I'm also very conscious because I haven't come from money. Um, I actually make them work for it quite a lot. So, like my two younger daughters, I mean, my oldest daughter's got a part-time job. The other two have been a bit cruising, and so I'm saying, okay, I'm going to cut off your monthly allowance, and two, go get yourself a part-time job because there's so much value to be learnt from a part-time job. So, what I say to my kids is that I will give you everything you need, but everything you want, you've got to work for, because I'm very conscious that because we do have money now, and they also go to really great schools that are surrounded by people with wealth, that they can be quite, have this attitude that sometimes they are entitled to things. And I do not want to bring up entitled children at all. So I actually make things a bit challenging for my kids. I don't get handouts. The younger two are getting a part-time job. The older one works. Yeah, I don't just give them handouts. I give them everything they need, but anything they want, they've certainly got to work for.
Yeah, I love that. I think that one of the challenges that I face is just because you can doesn't
Mm,
mean that you should, but there can be an expectation. Well, you can, so why wouldn't you? And
yeah,
it's like, well, you're missing the point. Like
yeah,
you need to have that work ethic and earn it. And
yeah.
the real gift, I'm sure you can relate to this as well. I think the real gift in success has absolutely zero to do with the money.
Mm,
That's
yeah.
how people measure it and say, oh, well, no, you're lying, whatever. But
Mm.
it has absolutely nothing to do with the money, does it?
No, and it's easy for us to say, right, because we have money. But money is just the enabler. It's what you do with that money that um, defines a good life, right? And it's not, and for me, it's not even about having. I mean, I do have a beautiful home and I have nice cars and I have nice things because I can afford that. But it's never been about that for me.
Yeah.
Even from the very beginning, when I started this whole wealth creation journey, for me, it was about control over my time. And being able to create a life with my family while they're young and still in the nest. And we travel every single year. And for me, I'd love to be able to create. I'd rather spend money on experiences rather than just
Experience,
material
absolutely.
stuff.
Yeah.
And they're going to be out of the nest soon. My eldest is now 17 and driving, so she's, soon to fly the nest. And we have such a short time with our kids that I wanted to make sure that we can, in that time, we can create lots of memories and travel the world and help them become the best version of themselves. And I think, yeah, by just giving them everything they want, I think that it can do a bit of a disservice to them at times in terms of if
Yeah.
they just expect it, then they're not going to reach their full potential because they'll just expect everything to be handed to them. So, but it's a balancing act, right? I haven't got it mastered by any means. I'm still trialing and error with my teenage girls, and I get the pushback and the rants and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, why can't I have that? So and so has this. Like,
Yeah,
well,
that's right.
you
Yeah.
know, anyway, we do our best, don't we?
That's right. Amanda, this has been fantastic. I have two more questions, and the first, I'm going to give you the last word in a second.
Yeah.
But obviously, I mean, I could keep talking to you for hours about this. I think we're very like-minded. We've come from similar backgrounds as well, and I just love where your mind is at with this. And so people will be listening, thinking, "Man, I want to get a piece of Rising Star and have Amanda hold my hand while I can create this." sort of wealth strategy for myself. Do you want to talk about how people can get in touch with you? I know you've got a free ebook out there as well, but you've got some programs going right now. So I am going to put the links below the program. Do you want to just talk us
Yeah.
about what you've got running at the moment?
Yeah, for sure. So if you want to learn more about the Rising Star Developer, you can just go to my website, risingstardeveloper.com.au. We are mostly Australian, and we'll put the links below. I have a free ebook, 7-Figure Secrets. So we'll put the link below that, and that'll also link to a program that I'm called the Cash Flow Accelerator, which will just teach you some cash flow strategies. It's quite a cheap program, $13, and where you can learn different cash flow strategies using it's $13. Just for people to understand the concept of property development from a cash flow perspective, to see if it's even right for them, because property development is not necessarily right for everybody. So I wanted people to have an opportunity to go through a lower value product to see if it's something that connects with them first. And then what I do is then I have my Inner Circle program for people who are really wanting the support and be part of an amazing community of like-minded people all around Australia that are taking the knowledge of what I teach them and are doing some incredible things. That's my program called the Inner Circle. So that is by application only. So I have amazing success coaches who have a chat to you if it's something that you want to, if you're serious about, to understand if this business is right for you and if we're a good fit together, because we want to make sure that we're the right fit. It's not just about you coming into me and me taking your money and there you go, away you go. It's not like that at all. I want to make sure that we can work together and achieve a great outcome. So that's part of the broader program. But if you want to know more, I've got a free 30-minute web class as well that should just give you a bit more of an insight into property development. So check out my website, and yeah, certainly love to be able to help if any of what I've said connects with you.
Yeah, look, I think what you've just said there is really important, because this is a really flooded space, right? Like,
Yeah.
ever since I've started having some guests on my show that are in this space, I mean, my goodness, my inbox is getting, inundated with all kinds of things. And I think what may look good at the end of the day, when you're new to something like this, you really need that hand holding, that person you can bounce those ideas off, like what you were saying, if you had the version of yourself now to be asking those questions of, you would have been able to do things with much more confidence and to get the outcomes faster. So I really love that about what you do with your programs. This has been absolutely amazing, Amanda. I know we could keep talking for hours, but I'm going to give you the final word. Thank you so much for being on the show today. What would you say has been the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice. Oh, wowzers. Gosh, I've had so much good advice in the past. Oh gosh, you've really put me on the spot here. I should have something that I should rattle off.
I said I wouldn't ask you a question you couldn't answer, and
I
I've
know you did.
saved it
You've
to the
got
last
me. You've
one.
got me. I think probably the best advice is just be think about how you can add value to others in the world, and if you can provide value to others in the world, whether that's creating homes or by helping somebody in some way, it'll come back to you in so many other ways that you'd never expect. That's not really a saying, but yeah, I think when
Great
you are
advice.
of service to others, you can really you'll and I say this to my community, right? The more you give, the more you get back in life.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's probably it. The more you give, the more you get
absolutely.
back.
Great work. Thanks so much for being on the show today, Amanda.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me. Bye for now.